It's no secret that the events of World War II have had a profound impact on the modern cultural landscape of our society. The sheer absurdity of all that occurred within Nazi Germany during the 30s and 40s has given the war a rather lingering presence within the public eye, in comparison to other recent historical events, as many can easily identify how this one war has vastly redefined the way in which society views the concepts of nationalism, discrimination, egotism, ideology, and the media. And you know what they say, if a historical event that occurred in a relatively recent period of history had a profound impact on society and the way in which people think, then some art sure is going to be made about it. Anyway, at some point, when you've already seen so many films and read so many books, both inside and outside of class on the subject of World War II, it becomes harder for each individual work to stand out on its own. Admittedly, I was initially drawn to read Anthony Doerr's... Is it Doerr or Doerr?
Anthony Doerr.
Whatever. I was drawn to read Anthony Doerr's All the Light We Cannot See purely because of my familiarity with the book's subject matter. Easier book, easier project, I get to move on with my life sooner. Boy, was I wrong. I sure do love my very relaxed senior year. God knows I need a little... I was by all means surprised by how much I enjoyed this book, and now here I am to discuss why. Fall the Right We Daren't Be is stupendous, a truly beautiful, daring, heartbreaking, joyous novel. Don't worry, I read the book. More than anything, the book does an excellent job of capturing the exaggerated swagger of those that lived through the war and how it affected the rest of their lives, which is something that less and less of us will personally witness testament of as time goes on, because this war ended almost exactly 78 years ago. I don't even know how to go forward from here, so I'm just gonna get into it. Anthony Doerr was born in Ohio and looks like a soulless corporate executive, so we're already off to a great start. Despite all of these factors working against him, though, he's actually a pretty good writer. He's written 6 books so far, and currently his most well-known work, Paul the Blart We Shopping Spree, has won numerous accolades since its 2014 publication, like the Pulitzer Prize, the Carnegie Medal, and even the prestigious honor of receiving a Netflix adaptation later this year that will inevitably be cancelled after just 1 season. The continuing relevance of this book clearly supports the conclusion that Doerr's writing has successfully resonated with people. But Klaus, did it resonate with you? Of course it did. I already said so like insert number of minutes that have passed since that part of the script where I said that I liked the book here ago. Wall of Night with Can of Bean is a historical fiction / war story / Bildungsroman / vignette style novel that follows the separate lives of 2 different protagonists as the war reshapes the world around them. The first of these 2 characters is a blind French girl named Marie-Laure Leblanc. Now how the hell...
Marie-Laure Leblanc.
Whatever. Marie-Laure Leblanc flees her home in Paris, France, with her quirky keyed-up papa during the German invasion of the country in the year 1940. The pair takes refuge in the 6-story home of her uncle, I swear to God,
Etienne,
in the coastal town of St. Malo, where they struggle to make ends meet under the German occupation. The other main character is a genius German boy named Werner Pfennig, who is forced into using his talents to serve the Third Reich rather than pursue his dream of becoming a renowned engineer. Initially destined to slave away in a coal mine for the rest of his life, Werner's growing reputation as a radio repairman allows him to attend the National Political Institute of Education at Schulpforte, but this only results in him being forced to design and test Nazi weapons against his will. The novel begins in the midst of the August 1944 American bombing of St. Malo. Doerr briefly sets up the bombing scenario before the story jumps back to 1934 and traces the events that led up to the attack. The structure of this novel goes a long way towards building suspense and intrigue, as little details about the August 1944 scenario are revealed between each major section of the book until the events of the past finally converge with and surpass this date in a rather climactic finale. Every other chapter swaps perspective between Marie-Laure and Werner, and occasionally some more minor characters, like the German jewel appraiser, Sergeant Major Reinhold von Rumpel, or Werner's friend and comrade Frank Volkheimer. This leads to some really neat moments later on, like in music number 1, 2, and 3, where 3 different chapters communicate the same moment from the perspective of 3 different characters in a row. Or in the chapter, The Simultaneity of Instants, which rapidly shifts perspectives in order to demonstrate how each main character's story pales in comparison to the all-encompassing scope of the war and its effect on humanity. Early on in the book, Doerr especially uses the 1944 vignettes to vividly describe the devastation that struck entire towns as a result of the war. Doors soar away from their frames, bricks transmute into powder, great distending clouds of chalk and earth and granite spout into the sky. Flames scamper up walls, parked automobiles catch fire, as do curtains and lampshades and sofas and mattresses and most of the 20,000 volumes in the public library. Passages like these that detail the war's destruction of daily life do a rather effective job of establishing the tone and core ideas that are explored throughout the rest of Doerr's book, as most of this novel focuses in on the struggle of those trying to build a future for themselves, or even just survive another day in the uncertain, cruel world that they now occupy. Almost every major character has some sort of physical or mental impairment that either resulted from the war or made them targets of Nazi cruelty. Marie-Laure goes blind at the age of 6 and loses both Madame Monet and her father during the war. Werner loses his hearing in his left ear and his life. Etienne is psychologically haunted by the events of World War I. Jutta is raped. Frederick becomes an invalid after being beat by his classmates and loses his long-term memory, and von Rumpel desperately seeks a cure for his cancer to no avail. Each of these characters is forced to live or die with rather apparent scars left over from the war that never fully heal, even after the story jumps ahead to show the continuing lives of characters like Volkheimer, Jutta, and Marie-Laure in 1974 and 2014. The parts of themselves that each character traumatically lost, the lights that they can no longer see, were all things that they had to learn to let go of and keep on living without. At first, I was apprehensive of Doerr's decision to end the novel with a snippet of Marie-Laure's twilight years in the 21st century, yet her final reflection on the events that composed her entire life was oddly beautiful and very effectively ended her character arc. The characters and the way in which their stories intertwine are where this novel really shines after all. Though seemingly disconnected from each other at the beginning of the novel, both Marie-Laure and Werner's sides of the story focus on similar thematic concepts like fate, agency, and uncertainty, which leads them to ultimately converge in a very complementary manner. Despite her intelligence and self-reliance, Marie-Laure struggles to overcome her fear of what lies beyond the limited scope of her vision. The Sea of Flames, a supposedly cursed diamond that was entrusted to Marie-Laure's father, is an object of desire for the world around them, yet the pair treat the stone with contempt. Both fear the idea that the stone and its curse might be real, trying to rationalize away their worries about their uncontrollable fate. Yet in occupied France, the two don't ever really have much of a choice about how they live their lives, and as the war wages on, Marie-Laure starts to fall further into despair. She loses her sight, her home, her father, her mother figure, and spends years of her adolescence trapped indoors and fearing for her life. Don't you ever get tired of believing, madam? Don't you ever want proof? You must never stop believing. That's the most important thing. Meanwhile, Werner and his sister Jutta grew up in a poverty-filled orphanage, yet the two dreamed of what they could do in the future, listening to foreign lectures and music on their secret radio. Yet when Werner attends a Nazi school in order to pursue his dreams, he doesn't understand why Jutta and his caretaker, Frau Elena, aren't very supportive of his decision. It isn't until his aloof and carefree classmate Frederick reveals the true nature of the Third Reich that Werner finally understands Jutta's disapproval of him. Frederick, who is fascinated by birds and only attends Werner's school in order to win the approval of his parents, becomes a frequent target of abuse among his classmates and instructors. I want to be an engineer, and you want to study birds. Why else do any of this if not to become who we want to be? Your problem, Werner, is that you still believe you own your life. While Werner sacrifices his moral compass and enables the Third Reich in order to pursue his career dreams, Frederick gives up on his aspirations and remains true to himself in the moment, which ultimately leads to his metaphorical death at the hands of his abusers. Frederick's favorite book, Birds of America, symbolizes this dichotomy of paradoxical freedom and captivity throughout the story. To my dear sister Yuta, it is very difficult now. Frederick used to say that there is no such thing as free will, and that every person's path is predetermined for him, just like... And that my mistake was that I hope someday you can understand. Having lost so much, both Marie-Laure and Werner's lives continue on outside of their control. Alone and afraid, Marie-Laure hides in her attic from Von Rumpel. Traumatized by what he's done and seen, Werner continues to follow orders against his will. It is not until the two main characters meet in the midst of the 1944 bombing that they overcome this sense of being trapped, of their lives not being their own. When I lost my sight, Werner, people said I was very brave. But it was not bravery. I have no choice. I wake up and live my life. Don't you do the same? Not in years. But today maybe I did. Despite being hopeless, Marie-Laure and Werner both carry on until they can find hope again. From the moment that Werner hears Clair de Lune from Marie-Laure's distress broadcast, he takes back his life and lives the rest of it in full control. From the moment that Marie-Laure abandons the Sea of Flames in the grotto, she finds the strength to let go of her fear and grief. And is it so hard to believe that souls might also travel those paths? That her father and Etienne and Madame Manet and the German boy named Werner Pfennig might harry the sky in flocks like egrets, like terns, like starlings? That great shuttles of souls might fly about, faded but audible if you listen closely enough? Every hour, she thinks, someone for whom the war was a memory falls out of the world. Yet we rise again in the grass, in the flowers, in the song.